Welcome to Business News. Now, public servants and the employee of state governments may not benefit from the 30,000 naira minimum wage approved by the federal government. This is as the Nigerian Governors Forum is saying that the increment of workers will have to depend on the capacity of each state. Going by this, workers in many states may get little or nothing, as many states can barely survive without the monthly allocation from the federal government. According to latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics, in the first half of this year, only 4 states generated revenue in excess of 100 billion naira. On the list of top earners are Lagos with 263 billion naira, Rivers State 151 billion naira, Delta 145 billion naira, and Akwa Ibom State 106 billion naira. Now, these 4 states might not have much difficulty paying the minimum wage, but same cannot be said for states like Ebonyi, Ekiti, Gombe and Osun, who are the lowest earners in the first half of this year. Ebonyi State could only rake in 26.5 billion naira, Taraba State 25.7 billion naira, Ekiti 25.5 billion naira, while Gombe 21.7 billion naira. And Osun State is at the bottom of the ladder with 20.2 billion naira. Meanwhile, Labour has vowed to resist the position of the NGF, stating that any governor not willing to pay should be ready for a showdown. And joining me now in our Lagos studio is an activist and public affairs analyst, Nelson Ekujumi. Good to have you join us on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Start off with the stance of the NGF, now stating categorically that we cannot see any consequential increment until we do a comparative analysis of the state's financial capacity. Yeah. Does this make enough sense to you?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense because we recognize that Nigeria is a federation. We operate a federal system of government. And based on that, premise, you recognize that states must have the capacity to negotiate based on their level, And looking at the statement from the governors, I don't think it is out of place because what we have now is the national minimum wage, and the national minimum wage is 30,000. There's no dispute about that across the state. But the consequential adjustment is what the governors, are raising hell about. And for me, I think it is a right call or a right cry because of the fact that what operates in Lagos State, the level of, standard of living in Lagos cannot be compared to the standard of living in, say, Osun or Ekiti State. And if we have always been advocating true federalism, then we should allow states, to live according to the dictates of the reality that obtains in their states. Agree that there's a national minimum. Whatever be the increment. Say Lagos can agree to pay 45,000 naira minimum and above. Osun State can say, look, you are paying 45, I can only afford 31,000 or even 30,200, depending on their capacity. So we should not, put everybody in the same box. But we must all agree that there's a minimum, a national minimum. But whatever be the increment, I think should be the outcome of an agreement or negotiation between the states and the various workers union in the states.
Now let's talk about states that are known to have old salaries of workers as well. These are also states that are endowed with mineral resources as well. What should we be doing in terms of boosting the IGR of those states, the State Executive Council, looking at the extractive industries, millions and billions of naira just sitting idle?
I think the responsibility lies with the states now through their representatives at the National Assembly to invoke a bill calling for an amendment to the Constitution such that the states will be able to tap into those resources that constitutionally is the preserve of the federal government, that those aspects of our Constitution that covers the exclusive list, such that some of those items can come under the concurrent list. The concurrent list are those that have the jurisdiction between the states and the federal government. So, in as much as the states are interested in increasing their IGR, it is also important for them to look through their representatives in the House of Reps and the Senate to look at the Constitution to see how they can be able to tap into the areas that is exclusively reserved for the federal government but are not being maximally utilized. In that way, they will be able to increase the IGR because their sense of governance, whether you are the state or you are the federal government or you are the local government, is for the benefit of the people. And whatever means that can be adopted to make life meaningful for the people by raising more revenue. Because like I always tell people, government does not print money. Money in circulation is a function of payment for goods and services. If the government wants to carry out road construction, the government will not go to the central bank and say, give me money, I want to construct.
Let's now talk about the performances of bailout funds, interventions, the Pirate Club, and a whole lot more. To what extent do you think we've seen states utilize all of these? And another challenge here is the fact that we still see the fact that the ratio of recurrent expenditure and then capital expenditure outweigh each other. So that is still going on the downward trend. And do you think we can see states meet up with this idea?
No, if there's a will, there's a way. The responsibility for monitoring how the bailout funds, Paris and other funds that were given to the states have been managed is the responsibility of the states' houses of assembly to ask the governors. They must make the executive accountable to the people so that money meant for projects are judiciously utilized for such projects and not diverted. So for me, the state houses of assembly have that great responsibility on behalf of the citizens, and even the citizens themselves also have that responsibility to ask questions. Societies that have made progress are societies that people have asked questions. So looking at the scenario on ground now, I think the states have the capacity, once there's the synergy between the people and the government, that look, this is the way to go to make life better for us, and not for us to just sit down in our house and continue to complain and do nothing. So I think we should use this as an opportunity to call on the various states House of Assembly to ask their governors, even previous governments, to come and account or give the account of
defense of all of the expenditures so
yes.
far. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Nelson Akujumi.
It's a pleasure.
Now, hello, welcome to Business News. Now, public servants and the employee of state governments may not benefit from the 30,000 naira minimum wage approved by the federal government. This is as the Nigerian Governors Forum is saying that the increment of workers will depend on the capacity of each state. Going by this, workers in many states may get little or nothing, as many states can barely survive without the monthly allocation from the federal government. According to latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics, in the first half of this year, only 4 states generated revenue in excess of 100 billion naira. On the list of top earners are Lagos with 263 billion naira, Rivers State with 151 billion naira, Delta State, on the other hand, 145 billion naira, and Akwa Ibom State, 106 billion naira. Now, these 4 states might not have much difficulty paying the minimum wage and also the consequential increment, but same cannot be said for states like Ebonyi, Ekiti, Gombe, and Osun, who are the lowest earners in the first half of this year. Ebonyi State could only rake in 26.5 billion naira, Taraba State 25.7 billion naira, Ekiti generated 25 billion naira, Gombe State 21.7 billion naira, and Osun State is at the bottom of the ladder with 20.2 billion naira. Meanwhile, Labour has vowed to resist the position of the NGF, stating that any governor not willing to pay should be ready for a showdown. And joining me now in our Lagos studio is an activist and public affairs analyst, Nelson Akujumi. Good to have you join us on the show.
Thank you.
Now, talking about the stance of the NGF, the chairman of the NGF says clearly that this decision on the consequential increment has to be that of the State Executive Council, and it's not in the place of the Federal Executive Council to impose such a decision. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that statement is very, very much in order, because we operate a federal system of government, and the federal government is in no way superior, or the governor general is not the government general over other states. The states and the federal government are coordinate, governments. So I think it is out of place for anybody to assume that the Federal Executive Council can make decisions, for states, because the Constitution recognizes that in a state there's a government in place, and the State Executive Council takes decisions with regards to affairs of the state. So this consequential adjustment, I think it will be more in tandem with the spirit of federalism. If the states are allowed to negotiate based on their capacity, based on the existing realities in the state, agree, there's no doubt about the 30,000 naira minimum wage, which is already a law because it has been signed by Mr. President since April. But the fact remains that the consequential adjustment cannot be the same for every state. States should be allowed, to exhibit, to practice the true tenets of federalism, whereby they should negotiate with the States Workers' Council on the template for the consequential adjustment. Because looking at how the consequential adjustment was arrived at, I looked at the list of, the members of the panel. I didn't see the representatives of the state. Neither was there the representative of the private sector. So we must be very careful not to set up a time bomb, that will engulf us all.
The engagements must be inclusive. Now, one of the issues that's also burning is the fact that we have so many failings when we are talking about internally generated revenue at state levels. You cannot do any comparison with Lagos and other states. You see the figures there. But now, annually, we lose about $10 billion annually from declining production of cocoa and other cash crops. And these states that are known to not raise enough of funds by themselves alone to run their states have some of the most arable land across the country. How much of a burning situation should we make agriculture and boosting infrastructure and having a strong value chain?
Yes, unfortunately, when I looked at your chart earlier on, where you said Lagos State generated about 260-something billion
so far,
in the first quarter of 2019, unfortunately, some of these states that were at the lowest rung of the ladder have the capacity to generate more than even Lagos, because why Lagos could be able to generate that is because of so many factors.
We have 77% of arable land, and Lagos just has a small concentration.
That is to tell you how we have failed with regards to our constitution that should have given the states the pass to exploit the natural resources in a lot of these states' territories. And looking at the agriculture you have just mentioned, I think the time has now come for even the states to look at how they can tap into this natural resource to better the lives of the people, to engage the citizenry, as well as to create wealth for the people. So it is imperative on the states, through their representatives in the National Assembly, that's the House of Reps and the Senate, to look at how they can amend the Constitution, such that some of the powers that are exclusively reserved for the federal government can be shared with the states, so that the states will be able to maximally tap into the agricultural potentials that they have. Because as we see, Osun State is on the lowest rung of the ladder. But the natural resource in Osun State, if the Constitution is amended to allow Osun State to take advantage of what God has endowed in that state, I'm sure they might be at par or even better than Lagos with regards.
Don't you think the state governments are also playing lazy for the fact that they know they can always fall back on interventions from the federal government? Instead, if we should have a sharper stance, removing all of the interventions, bailout funds, you name it, do you think they'll be able to match up and make use of all of these areas of comparative advantages?
Well, I wouldn't subscribe to your submission that the governments are playing lazy, because of the fact that some of the areas that the governments have not been able to exploit is because they are constitutionally hamstrung. There's nothing they can do as a government.
So that's where they should be pushing for reforms.
Yes, that's where they should be. And that is what we are doing right now. If some of them are not thinking along this line, I think it is imperative on them. The states' houses of assembly have a responsibility to do that. Even the workers' council in the states have a responsibility to push the governments at the various states, to look in this direction, so that we'll be able to have industrial harmony in all the states. And the
okay, thank you very much for your submission there, Nelson Okujimi. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much for having me.